He married her for laughs. A cruel joke to impress his rich friends. She wasn't what he imagined. She was so much more. And when the truth came out, not even his billions could save him from what she had planned. Stay until the end. Because what she did next changed not only his life, but shattered everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and power. Now ask yourself, what kind of woman walks away from a man worth $800 million, smiling? The wedding was held on a private island off the coast of Sardinia. Invitations were gold leaf printed. The guest list read like a Forbes gala: oil tycoons, supermodels, crypto kings. And standing at the altar, in a custom-fitted tuxedo worth more than most people's homes, was Chase Hamilton, the 32-year-old tech billionaire whose face had graced 3 magazine covers that year alone. Next to him, a woman no one could place. Not the usual size 0 model. Not a celebrity. Not even Instagram famous. She was different. Her name was Amara. Full-figured, regal, with skin like polished bronze and eyes that studied the room like she was the one in control. She wore a form-fitting white gown that didn't hide her body, it celebrated it. And yet, whispers rippled through the crowd. Is this a prank? Is he filming something? She's not his type. The truth was far more twisted. Because what most people didn't know was this. Chase had made a bet. Weeks before, during a drunken poker game on his yacht, someone had dared him to do the unthinkable. Marry a random woman, someone who didn't fit the billionaire lifestyle, and make her fall in love with him. If he pulled it off and stayed married for a year, he'd win $5 million from each player at the table. A total of $35 million. It was just a game. To him. But not to Amara. Not even close. According to Dr. Diane Kleisner, a behavioral psychologist who studied narcissistic dynamics in ultra-wealthy relationships, this isn't new. Wealth can create a bubble of impunity. What's rare is when someone punctures it from the inside. Because what Chase didn't realize was, Amara wasn't a random choice. He thought he had picked her. But in many ways, she picked him. The first time they met was at a downtown LA coffee shop. She was reading a book on quantum mechanics. He was there for a quick espresso in between meetings, and forgot his wallet. Amara paid for his drink. He thanked her with a smirk and a business card. A week later, he invited her to dinner in Malibu. She declined. He was intrigued. Because no one told Chase Hamilton no. Not twice. So when she finally said yes, 3 dinners later, he saw her as a challenge. Something to win. To tame. He never asked what she did for work. Never questioned how she could afford to live where she did. Never noticed the quiet confidence behind her laughter. Because Chase, like most people in his world, only looked at the surface. On the day of the wedding, as he slipped the ring on her finger, Chase whispered, "Just play your part. 1 year and we're both richer." Amara looked him in the eye, smiled, and said, 1 year is a long time. It was the first warning shot. But Chase didn't hear it. Not yet. Because for him it was all just a game. For her, it was the beginning of something far more calculated. And devastating. Chase woke up late, sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Beverly Hills estate, or what used to be his estate. He reached for his phone on the nightstand. Gone. He rolled over. No Amara. Just a note. Breakfast in the garden. I've invited a guest. Don't be late. Eh. Chase chuckled. She's bold, he muttered, throwing on his silk robe and slipping into $800 Versace slides. He expected to find Amara sipping tea with a chef or maybe a stylist. But instead, sitting across from her in the garden was Harold Klein, Chase's private attorney of 12 years. The same Harold who handled all of Chase's NDAs, his prenup, and even buried more than one scandal over the years. Chase's amusement turned to confusion. Harold? What the hell's going on? Harold didn't smile. Chase. Sit. Amara didn't speak. She just sipped her tea calm as ever. Harold opened a leather-bound folder and slid a document across the marble table. Chase stared at the heading. Marital Asset Realignment Agreement, effective immediately. What is this? Chase laughed, but his voice cracked. Amara finally looked up. I added a clause. Section 12C. He flipped to it. If the union is entered under false pretenses for monetary gain, the partner initiating deception forfeits full ownership of shared holdings. Where did you get this? Chase hissed. You can't. I can, she interrupted. You signed it? 3 days ago. Vegas. Remember the penthouse suite? He did. Sort of. They had gone to Vegas after closing a media deal. He'd been drunk. She'd asked him to sign what she called a wedding protection form. More to protect her, she had joked. He hadn't even read it. And now the woman he married as a bet just took half of everything. I warned you, Harold said softly. I told you to slow down. But you don't listen. Chase was boiling now. I'll fight this. Amara raised a brow. With what? A team of lawyers I already own. Because while Chase was busy mocking her in his group chats, Amara had been quietly replacing staff, switching legal firms and rerouting access. She had access to everything. Because she paid attention. Because she was smarter. And because, unlike Chase, Amara planned ahead. According to Marcella Vane, a legal analyst specializing in high-net-worth marriages, in 92% of rushed marriages involving extreme wealth, there are overlooked legal vulnerabilities. The power often lies not in who has more, but in who knows more. Amara had known from the beginning. And Chase had underestimated her from the moment he laid eyes on her. Chase stormed out of the garden, heart pounding. He didn't care about the money. He cared that she had outplayed him. And deep down, a small part of him was starting to feel something foreign. Fear. But that was just the beginning. Because Amara wasn't after his fortune. She was after something far more dangerous. And it all started with an old man in a wheelchair waiting for Chase in the study. The man who knew his darkest secret. The study was dim, the heavy curtains drawn against the morning light. The smell of aged leather and Cuban cigars hung in the air. Chase pushed open the door, still fuming from the garden ambush, and froze. Sitting in his father's antique armchair was a man he hadn't seen in years. Elliot Graves. Former business partner. Former best friend. And the one person Chase swore he'd never speak to again. Because 5 years earlier, Elliot had taken the fall for Chase in a securities fraud investigation. He spent 14 months in a white-collar prison. Chase never visited. Now Elliot sat before him, thinner, grayer, and staring at him like a chess master waiting for the next move. You look like hell, Elliot said, sipping brandy, Chase's brandy. What the hell are you doing in my house? Your house. Elliot smirked. Funny. Amara didn't mention that part. Chase's fists clenched. What does she have to do with you? Elliot leaned forward, voice low. She knows everything, Chase. About the bet. About the fund you buried offshore. About the NDA scandals. About me. Chase's breath caught. She found you? Elliot nodded. She didn't find me. I found her. And when she told me what you did, I knew it was time. Amara stood silently in the doorway now. Like a queen entering a throne room. She didn't marry you for revenge, Elliot said. That part came later. Chase turned to her, his voice a whisper. What do you want? Amara answered without hesitation. Truth. Exposure. A reckoning. At first, it sounded dramatic, theatrical even, but Chase knew she meant every word. And what scared him more than anything was that Elliot Graves, the man who once took a bullet for his empire, was now standing beside her. And Chase was outnumbered. Outplayed. Out of time. According to Dr. Naima Lee, a professor of sociology specializing in power dynamics, when individuals in power face orchestrated accountability by those they once dismissed, the psychological collapse is often more damaging than financial loss. It's a slow undoing of control. And Chase? He was unraveling. The next day, Amara held a press conference. It wasn't about the marriage. It wasn't about the fortune. It was about truth. She exposed the terms of the bet. Played audio recordings. Released documents. The media exploded. Billionaire marries woman as joke, gets exposed on live TV. The internet devoured it. But that wasn't the worst part. Because in the crowd, watching silently from the back row, was a young woman in a yellow sundress. Her name was Talia. And she had a secret of her own. A secret Chase had buried 6 years earlier. A secret Amara had just resurrected. And when Talia stepped forward, Chase's knees nearly buckled. She stood at the edge of the crowd, barely 23, her presence unnoticed at first. But as the final question echoed from the press conference podium, Talia stepped forward, calm, composed, and holding a slim black folder. Amara saw her. She nodded once. And just like that, the storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. Chase froze. The color drained from his face. No one else recognized her, but he did. He'd spent years trying to forget. Talia was the intern from his startup's early days. Bright. Ambitious. Just 19. She'd idolized Chase. Wanted to work her way up in the company. Until the day she came to him with a business proposal, and left his office in tears. No one believed her. She vanished. Quietly. With a check Chase's lawyers insisted was part of her severance package. She had no voice. No platform. Until now. The camera shifted as Talia walked to the mic. "My name is Talia Green," she began, voice steady. "6 years ago, Chase Hamilton took something from me that I can never get back. And today, I'm here to take something from him." She opened the folder. Inside were screenshots, emails, a timeline, audio clips recorded during board meetings. Every detail of how Chase had silenced her, and others. The crowd gasped. Reporters scrambled. Microphones were shoved forward. And Amara? She stood by, silent and strong. Like she'd known this moment was coming all along. Back in the mansion, Chase watched from the security feed. The walls of his empire, once so bulletproof, now buckled under the weight of truth. His phone lit up with PR crises. Board members resigning. Stock prices crashing. Everything unraveling, piece by piece. According to Felix Hammond, a crisis management consultant who's worked with multiple billion-dollar companies, when the fall comes from inside, there's no way to spin it. A betrayal from within the inner circle is more catastrophic than 1,000 news leaks. And that's exactly what Amara had orchestrated. An inside job. But there was something even more dangerous about Talia. Because unlike the others, she didn't want money. She wanted justice. Public, televised, irreversible justice. And she had one last bombshell. "I wasn't the only one," Talia said into the mic. She turned toward the crowd. "If he's hurt you, silenced you, humiliated you, this is your moment. Step forward." And then, like a scene out of a courtroom drama, 3 more women emerged from the shadows. 3 more voices. 3 more secrets. All tied to one man. And all backed by Amara. Chase turned from the screen. Panic gave way to fury. "This ends now," he hissed. He still had connections. Still had power. Still had secrets. But what he didn't know was that one of those secrets was already in Amara's hands. One he thought he had destroyed forever. A secret buried in a safety deposit box in Geneva. And Amara? She had the key. The box was hidden in Vault 17B, inside a private bank in Geneva, a place so exclusive it didn't show up on maps. Only 5 people in the world had access to that vault. Or so Chase thought. He remembered the day he locked it. 3 black USB drives, 1 red envelope, and a single hand-signed document with names he swore would never be exposed. That box held the core of his empire's corruption. A skeleton archive that could take down not just him, but 3 of his competitors, 1 senator, and his own father's legacy. Amara knew. Because Amara had the key. And now she had opened it. It started with a signature. A single forged line on a transfer of ownership form. One that redirected Chase's Swiss holdings into a new trust. The trustee? Hamilton. Not Amara by marriage. Amara by design. Because her full name wasn't Amara Westley as Chase believed. It was Amara Hamilton, daughter of the very man Chase's father had bankrupted 25 years earlier. A callback. A bloodline. A revenge written in DNA. By the time Chase learned of the vault breach, it was too late. Swiss authorities were alerted. Intercontinental banking laws triggered. The news hit every business outlet within the hour. Massive tax evasion scheme linked to Hamilton conglomerate, whistleblower files revealed. But the files weren't just revealed. They were narrated. Amara had recorded a full documentary, with Talia as narrator and Elliot Graves as executive producer. It was called The Price of Power. It premiered on 3 streaming platforms within 72 hours. Chase didn't speak to the media. He didn't leave the house. He fired his assistants, locked down his estate, and flew in a crisis team. But nothing could stop the wave. Because this wasn't just a scandal. It was a reckoning. According to Lila Dumas, former MI5 intelligence advisor now working in corporate security, what Amara executed wasn't just whistleblowing. It was psychological warfare, slow, precise, and devastating. Chase was no longer fighting Amara. He was fighting consequences. And yet, through the storm, a single question echoed in Chase's mind. Why didn't she just divorce him? She had what she needed. She could have walked away. But Amara didn't. Not yet. Because there was still one piece missing from her puzzle. A final truth. One that didn't come from revenge or strategy, but from pain. And it involved someone Chase had forgotten. Or tried to. A girl named Sophie. And the letter Amara had just found was addressed to her. The envelope was yellowed with time, edges worn, the handwriting elegant and unfamiliar. It was tucked between documents in the Geneva deposit box, almost as if forgotten or never meant to be found. Amara read the name on the front once, twice. To Sophie, for when I'm gone. Signed only with an initial, C. She opened it. Inside was a 2-page handwritten letter. And by the second paragraph, Amara's hands were shaking. Sophie wasn't a girlfriend. She wasn't a business partner. Sophie was Chase's daughter. Born to a woman named Natalia Carter, a former research analyst in Chase's company who died shortly after childbirth. She had tried to tell Chase. Tried to reach out. But Chase's lawyers blocked every attempt. When she died, Sophie went into the system. No inheritance. No acknowledgement. Only a letter left behind by her mother, meant for Chase. But he never read it. Instead, it ended up in Geneva. Still hidden. Until now. Amara called Talia. Find her. Talia didn't hesitate. She reached out through private investigator networks, scanned adoption databases, even combed through old employee records. And in less than 48 hours she found her. Sophie Carter. Age 17. Living in a foster home in Oakland, California. Bright. Reserved. Draws constantly. No idea who her father was. Amara didn't tell her at first. She visited the group home posing as a donor. Talked to the staff. Met the girls. Watched Sophie from afar. And what she saw broke her. Because Sophie looked just like Chase. The same intense eyes. The same defiant posture. But she also had something else. Something Chase had lost long ago. Innocence. Amara sat outside the home that night, staring at the sky, the letter in her hand. She knew what exposing Chase would do. But she also knew. Sophie deserved the truth. All of it. The next morning Amara went back. She asked to speak to Sophie alone. And when they sat across from each other in the sunlit library, she took a deep breath. There's something I need to tell you, she said gently. About your father. Sophie tilted her head. I don't have one. Amara handed her the letter. As the girl read, her lips parted. Her fingers trembled. But she didn't cry. When she finished, she looked up. Is it true? Amara nodded. I'm sorry. Sophie stared out the window. Then said something Amara never expected. Does he know I exist? A beat. Then Amara replied. He's about to. That evening, a courier arrived at Chase's estate. Inside the envelope, a photo of Sophie. And a copy of the letter. No note. No signature. Just the truth. And when Chase saw her face, something cracked in him. Because for the first time since this war began, he didn't feel anger. He felt shame. According to Dr. Lucien Farr, a trauma psychologist, shame is the most destabilizing emotion for people with power. It strips away the illusion of control. When faced with the human cost of their choices, many break. And Chase? He was breaking. But Amara wasn't done. She didn't want revenge anymore. She wanted something deeper. She wanted Chase to make a choice. And that choice would be waiting for him. In a school gymnasium in Oakland. Where Sophie would be drawing alone. And where Chase would come face to face with the one thing he couldn't buy, silence, or destroy. His own blood. The gymnasium echoed with quiet. Basketballs sat untouched in the corners. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long streaks of warmth on the polished wood floor. At the far end, sitting cross-legged on the ground, a girl was sketching. Head down. Focused. Come. Her name was Sophie. She didn't know he was coming. Chase stood in the doorway frozen. No security. No assistance. No armor. Just a man, stripped of status, swallowed by guilt, staring at the daughter he'd never known existed. He took a step. Then another. Each one heavier than the last. Sophie looked up. Their eyes met. She didn't flinch. Didn't smile. Didn't cry. She simply asked, Are you him? Chase nodded slowly. I'm Chase. She studied him for a long moment. Then, with the calm of someone far older than 17, she said, I don't need anything from you. But I wanted to see your face. They sat in silence. No camera crews. No headlines. Just father and daughter, surrounded by echoes and hardwood. I didn't know about you, Chase whispered. I believe you, Sophie said. But that doesn't change what happened. He nodded, then handed her something. A sketchbook, filled with drawings of her. Not ones he made, but ones Amara had gathered. From files. Photos. Court records. She had pieced together Sophie's life, and Chase had spent the last 2 nights memorizing every page. I want to know you, he said. If you'll let me. Sophie took the book, flipped through it, and then she said the second thing that broke him. You'll have to earn that. According to Dr. Malika Shen, a family therapist who specializes in estranged parental relationships, reconnection is never about fixing the past. It's about showing up, again and again, until trust decides to come back on its own terms. Chase didn't argue. He just nodded. And for the first time in his life he listened. That night he called Amara. She answered on the first ring. I met her, he said quietly. She's incredible. I know, Amara replied. Pause. Then Chase asked the question he'd been avoiding. Why did you do all this? Amara didn't answer right away. Then finally. Because I wanted you to feel something real. But that wasn't the end of their conversation. Because Amara had one final condition. A public one. And it would take place at the charity gala Chase once refused to attend, the same one he'd mocked for being a waste of rich people's time. Now it would be the stage for a speech that would shake the world. And Sophie? She would be the one introducing him. The invitation was sent to every major outlet. One night. One man. One confession. But what Chase didn't know was that someone else had been watching. A rival billionaire. A former friend. And this man had no intention of letting Chase redeem himself in peace. Because redemption would come at a cost. The ballroom glowed under crystal chandeliers. Velvet curtains framed golden walls. And the scent of lilies hung thick in the air. The Hamilton Foundation Charity Gala had returned, reborn under Amara's leadership. But this time there was no red carpet glitz. There were no influencers. No champagne fountains. Only purpose. And a single spotlight on the stage. Chase arrived alone. No cameras followed. No reporters shouted his name. He wore a simple black suit, no tie, and a face lined with humility. The whispers started as soon as he walked in. That's him? Is that the guy from the documentary? Why would he show up here? He didn't react. He walked to the front row. Took a seat. Waited. Then the lights dimmed. A piano played softly. And Sophie walked onto the stage. She looked radiant, not in glitter or silk but in strength. She cleared her throat. I was told a father is someone who shows up. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. She paused. Tonight he showed up. A beat. Please welcome, my father. Chase Hamilton. The room held its breath. Chase walked slowly to the mic. He looked out over the crowd, CEOs, victims, former employees, press. All eyes locked on him. I was the kind of man who believed power was the only thing that mattered, he began. I hurt people. Ignored people. Bought silence. Bought comfort. I lost track of what was real. He looked over at Amara. I married a woman as a game. And she turned that game into a lesson I'll never forget. He turned to Sophie. And I ignored a daughter who deserved better. The room was silent. Until one person clapped. Then another. Then the whole room. But not everyone applauded. Standing in the shadows near the exit was a tall man in a navy coat. Vincent Maddox. Chase's former business partner. The one he betrayed to launch his original tech company. Vincent had lost everything. And while Chase was chasing redemption, Vincent was planning ruin. According to insider journalist Marlene Jacks, Vincent Maddox disappeared from the public eye 3 years ago after a failed merger. Rumors circulated that he blamed Chase Hamilton for orchestrating his downfall. But no one ever confirmed it. Until now. After the gala, Chase returned to his penthouse, not the mansion which now belonged to Amara. There, waiting for him in the lobby, was a sealed envelope. No name. Just a silver wax seal. He opened it. Inside, a photo. Of Sophie. At school. A red circle drawn around her. And a note. Redemption has a price. Yours just came due. Security footage showed no one entering or leaving. Vincent had slipped past everyone. And now Chase wasn't just facing guilt or scandal. He was facing a threat. Real. Personal. Terrifying. He called Amara. But her phone went straight to voicemail. Because she was already on the move. Sophie was missing. And the man behind it was the one Chase had betrayed first. And Vincent? He wasn't playing games. He was ready to finish what Chase started. The storm broke just after midnight. Rain slammed the city in sheets, drowning out sirens, headlights, and hope. Amara stood alone outside Sophie's school. Empty. No guards. No signs of struggle. Just her daughter, gone. She clutched the photo from the envelope, knuckles white, mind racing. Whoever took her had resources. Timing. A message to send. And only one name fit. Vincent Maddox. Chase arrived minutes later, soaked to the bone, heart pounding like a war drum. What did you do? Amara hissed. I swear I didn't know, Chase gasped. But I can fix it. She stared at him. Then handed him a tablet. Live feed. Warehouse. Camera number 6. Sophie. Tied to a chair. Blindfolded. Alive. A voice echoed over the feed. Vincent's. You took everything from me, Chase. Now I take everything from you. Let's see what your soul's really worth. He had sent coordinates. A time. And one condition. Chase had to come alone. Unarmed. No police. And sign over every remaining asset live on camera, or Sophie disappears. According to hostage negotiator Leo Greer, revenge kidnappings aren't about ransom. They're about control, humiliation, and psychological annihilation of the target. Vincent didn't want money. He wanted Chase on his knees. Amara turned to Chase. Don't go. We'll find another way. But Chase shook his head. No. I started this. I'll end it. The next hour was a blur. Legal files printed. Bank accounts unlocked. Controls seated. Chase walked into the warehouse with nothing but a flash drive and a red pen. Cameras already rolling. Vincent stood in the shadows. Older. Sharper. Cold fury in his eyes. He motioned to Sophie, still restrained. One signature, he said. And she lives. Chase stepped forward. Hand shook. Pen trembled. He signed. 1, 2, 3 documents. Everything gone. Vincent smirked. Then reached for his phone. But before he could press send, a single word cut through the room. Now. Spotlights. Doors burst open. SWAT. Amara stormed in with a tactical team, FBI agents, and Elliot Graves, now a federal informant. Vincent froze. Too late. He reached for Sophie, but Chase lunged. Took him to the ground. Chaos exploded. But minutes later, it was over. Vincent in cuffs. Sophie in her mother's arms. And Chase? Bleeding. Bruised. But standing. The footage went viral within hours. Former billionaire sacrifices fortune to save daughter. But Chase didn't care about clicks anymore. He sat quietly in the hospital watching Sophie sleep. Amara stood beside him. She's safe, she whispered. Chase nodded. I don't care about the money. I don't care what people think. He turned to her. I just want to be better. She studied him. Then finally. Then start now. 3 months later, Chase Hamilton stood before a judge. He pled guilty to obstruction, financial misconduct, and accessory to corporate fraud. He served 18 months in a minimum security facility. No lawyers. No favors. Just time. Time to think. Time to heal. Time to change. And when he walked out of those gates, Amara and Sophie were waiting. Not with flowers. Not with forgiveness. But with an offer. One last shot. Not at wealth. Not at redemption. But at family. The sun hung low as Chase stepped out of the gates. No photographers. No journalists. No limos. Just silence, and 2 faces he thought he'd never earn back. Amara. And Sophie. He paused, hands trembling, unsure if he was even allowed to smile. Sophie stepped forward first. No words. Just a hug. It was soft. Brief. But real. Chase closed his eyes. That hug meant more than all the applause he'd ever chased. Amara watched in silence. Then handed him a simple envelope. One chance, she said. No cameras. No manipulation. No shortcuts. Chase opened it. Inside was a document. A contract. No money involved. It was a partnership agreement for a foundation. A nonprofit aimed at restoring lives destroyed by corporate negligence. Her foundation. Sophie's name on the board. Elliot as CFO. And a single line written by hand at the bottom. Your name goes on this only if you prove you belong here. No signature space. Not yet. According to governance strategist Carla Mendez, reintegration after a public fall requires more than apologies. It demands proof of transformation and accountability, especially when power was previously abused. And that's what this was. Not a handout. Not a path back to glory. But a test. Chase didn't flinch. I'll earn it, he said. Over the next year, Chase worked. Not as a CEO. Not as a leader. But as a volunteer. He mopped floors at halfway houses. He mentored kids in underserved schools. He showed up, again and again, with no press, no suits, no nameplates. People started to talk. He's serious. He's not faking it. He's changing. 1 year later, Sophie invited him to her art exhibit. The theme? Restoration. Each canvas showed broken things put back together, not perfectly but truthfully. And at the center of the gallery, a sculpture. A shattered golden crown welded back with iron moss growing over it. Sophie stood beside him. I call it, the man you used to be. Chase didn't speak. He just nodded. And in that silence, Sophie handed him a pen. Sign it, she said. And he did. The partnership. The foundation. His place finally earned. But just as the exhibit closed, Amara pulled him aside. There's one more thing, she said. She handed him a thick black folder. Inside were documents, names, bank transfers, a pattern, and one photo that stopped him cold. It wasn't of him. It was of his father, smiling, next to Vincent Maddox, and someone Chase didn't recognize, a woman with sharp eyes, holding a briefcase marked with a foreign emblem, and at the top of the file a single title. Phase 2, The Real Game Begins. Because what Chase didn't know was that everything he thought he exposed was only the surface, and the truth about his family, about Amara's rise, and Sophie's danger, was still buried deep, and someone out there was preparing to finish what Vincent failed to do. Because redemption doesn't end with forgiveness. It ends when the past stops hunting your bloodline. Rain fell again just like the night Sophie vanished. But this time it wasn't chaos. It was clarity. Chase sat alone in his apartment, the black folder spread before him, pages marked with red tape, symbols he didn't recognize and names he'd only seen whispered in shareholder meetings, in countries he had never visited but his father had. The woman in the photo haunted him. Amara entered quietly, her expression unreadable. She's not just anyone, she said. She was your father's fixer. Operated under diplomatic immunity. Helped Vincent hide assets across 4 continents. And she's Sophie's godmother. Chase blinked. What? Amara nodded. She's not just connected to your past. She planned it. According to declassified documents traced back by Elliot, Chase's father had created a covert financial network in the late 90s, one designed to funnel wealth through charitable fronts. Vincent and this woman, codename ND, were the architects. And Chase? He'd inherited not just the fortune but the secrets, without even knowing. But now, everything was unraveling. Because ND had resurfaced. She'd been off the grid for years. Until Amara's expose. And her message was simple. You dug up my legacy. Now I dig up yours. It began with subtle moves. An anonymous donation to a PAC with ties to Chase's former board. A smear campaign targeting Sophie's foundation. And a break-in at the warehouse where the Geneva files had been stored. All signs pointed to one thing. ND was erasing evidence. But not before planting her own. Then the call came. From Switzerland. One of the banks had received a death certificate. For Chase. Filed under an alternate alias, the one tied to the offshore vaults. It meant one thing. Someone was planning to erase him completely. Digitally. Legally. And eventually, physically. Chase met with Amara, Sophie, and Elliot in a secure location. This isn't about me anymore, he said. It's about what's coming. They knew it too. The storm wasn't over. It was evolving. Sophie leaned forward, her hands firm on the table. Then we hit first. Amara raised a brow. We. Sophie nodded. I'm not hiding anymore. I've lived in the shadow of his power my whole life. Now, I want to use it. The plan wasn't legal. It wasn't safe. But it was necessary. Using Indy's own encryption keys, found in her signature pattern embedded in one of the files, they traced a private server hidden behind an NGO in Estonia. Inside, decades of records, dirty ties, political alliances, names that, if released, would change entire governments. And at the heart of it, a contingency file labeled the Hamilton Protocol. It was a plan for global restructuring of assets in the event of Chase's public collapse, written by his father. A plan to reset the dynasty. But Sophie didn't want to rebuild the dynasty. She wanted to end it. They made a choice. Leak the files. All of them. Full exposure. No deals. No protection. No anonymity. Just truth. When the documents dropped, the internet exploded. Governments reeled. Interpol opened investigations. Sanctions were imposed. And for the first time in decades, the Hamilton name no longer held power. It held history. A cautionary tale. Months later, Chase sat on a park bench. No guards. No suits. Just a man feeding birds, watching Sophie run an art therapy class nearby. Amara joined him. "You did it," she said. "No," Chase replied. "We did." She handed him a small envelope. Inside, a single photo. Of the three of them. Smiling. Oh, free. No titles. No lies. Just a family rebuilt from ashes. Because in the end, the story wasn't about a man who married a woman for fun. It was about a woman who turned betrayal into purpose. A daughter who turned pain into power. And a man who finally learned that love doesn't follow contracts. It rewrites them.